Dear viewers and readers, today we are honored to welcome Shannon Nelson, a distinguished OG Olive Branch mentor, a dedicated leader, and an enthusiast in professional development with nearly 24 years of invaluable experience in healthcare. She brings a fresh, honest, and transparent perspective, shaping how we navigate professional life in today's dynamic workforce. With her evidence based approach and transformational leadership and passion for mentorship, Shannon continues to inspire and empower emerging professionals. Let's dive into this enlightening conversation. Shannon, welcome.
Wow, thank you. That was a great introduction. I appreciate that very much. Makes me sound like I'm way more important than I actually am.
You are important. You are important because you are doing such a great job with the media that you're handling right now, your podcast, and yeah. Just to just start with that you have such a diverse background in healthcare. So can you share how your journey began and what has kept you motivated over the years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think my experience is sort of an anomaly because not every person has their career sort of set up for them as conveniently as mine was. My stepmother was an administrator in a long-term care home. And in Canada, in Ontario, we have something in high school when you're in grade 9 called Take Your Kids to Work Day. And so my mother actually brought me to the long-term care home where she was an administrator. And I spent, a day kind of watching her work. And, she gave me some little projects throughout the day. And I enjoyed it so much. I had, such a good time spending, the day with the activities department and spending time with the elderly people, that my stepmom was like, when you are old enough, we'll get you a job here. And so it wasn't too long after that that she kind of had the power to make that happen. And I started working in long-term care at 14. So when we say that I have,
Okay.
nearly 24 years of experience, I'm not saying I've been an executive leader for 24 years, but my entire life has been revolving around my growth and my maturity
Wow. Wow.
throughout my career. I started in the laundry department, and then I moved into the housekeeping department, and then I was in the
Mm.
dietary department, and then I worked as a PSW. And it was never obvious to me as a young person, exactly what I was going to do. I thought that I was going to be a journalist or a writer. Healthcare never really sort of clicked for me until my first year of university, and I actually started my undergraduate degree as an English and creative writing major. And I changed my major after first semester because I just thought to myself, what am I doing? Like, how am I going to be an English and creative, writing person? So when I went home for Christmas break, after my first semester in my undergrad, I went to the University of Windsor. Um, Went home for Christmas break, and I was picking up shifts at the long-term care home. And I just had a couple of conversations with people that I was working with. So keep in mind, I'm like 18 years old. I've already been working in long-term care for 4 years
Yeah.
at that point. And I had, some really transparent conversations with some of my colleagues. And they basically just said to me, like, why don't you just do this? Like, why don't you focus
Yeah.
on healthcare? And, it was kind of a back and forth conversation around whether I would go into nursing or whether I would go into social work or what exactly it was I was going to do. And I actually leaned into social work because I saw it as a lot more broader scope, and that it wouldn't necessarily confine me, just to clinical, that I could do all kinds of things with social work. So ultimately, it was after that Christmas break, my first year of university, that things sort of started to snowball from there. And I really felt like I had more direction on what the end game was. Like, I realized then that I was playing the long game, and I needed to sort of come up with a strategy and, a plan. Even at such a young age, I was already thinking, okay, if I do this, then I can do this, and I need to be registered with a professional college, and then I can get into the hospital. And so from 18 to about 25 was education, lots of education. I moved to Toronto in 2010, continued on with education. I worked in a long-term care home in Toronto for a year-long maternity leave contract. And then from there, I was doing a placement, a practicum placement in school. And there was somebody that just kind of latched, she just was magnetized to me as a mentor, and it was very natural for us. It seemed to me more like a friendship than anything, but indirectly, she was really guiding and sort of just giving me the right tips and the right toolkit that you need as a young professional to, make your mark in early on in your career. Shout out to Leslie. And Leslie ultimately was the person who got my resume into the hands of a hiring manager at University Health Network, downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
And I interviewed at Toronto Western Hospital. I blew the interview out of the water. It went so well. And, I was pretty well offered the job, within a day or so of the interview. And, working at one of the most, well-respected, world-renowned teaching institution, working alongside some of the most brilliant minds in healthcare. Toronto Western, well, UHN as a whole, they've been pioneers in a lot of the
Yeah.
specifically the department that I worked in or continue to work in today. Not in the same hospital, but I've become very fascinated by patient flow and hospital operations. And that's all because of this initial job, my first sort of experience in acute care after working in long-term care for nearly 10 years. Moved into acute care, aligned myself with patient flow and clinical operations. And from there, it was very obvious to me that I wanted to be a leader. Like, I didn't necessarily realize at 24, 25, like, yeah, I'm going to be an executive leader. But it wasn't until I got into these meetings with other executives and I would be sitting at the table, and all due respect to the people I would be sitting with, but I would think to myself, I can do your job better than you.
Better than you. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was sort of the method to my madness. Was I see these people who are doing this work, but I see, or at least I felt, that I could do this too. And I really wanted that to happen. And I'll try to make this sort of brief, but I started interviewing for leadership positions about 4 years into working at UHN. And I was being interviewed, but I was never being picked for the positions because I kept being told, you don't have experience managing people.
Okay.
And so I would say to myself, like, well, if I don't have experience managing people, how do I get experience managing people if you don't give me the chance to manage people? So then I went back to U of T. I actually took a Con Ed program at U of T, Leadership Essentials, and it was all about managing people and critical
Yeah.
thinking. I actually won a scholarship from that program, Larry Chester Leadership Excellence Something Scholarship, was celebrated for that. And another person, actually, Leslie had always my mentor had always kind of been in the background rooting for me and whatnot. But there came a point when I sort of surpassed Leslie and I was focused more on, again, sort of pursuing leadership, and Leslie was very clinical focused. So while she was rooting for me, I had to then kind of find other people who would be able to guide me and help me make decisions about moving on into executive leadership. And a lot of the encouragement came down to, you need to get out of the downtown core of Toronto because the competition is too fierce and you're competing against PhDs and people that have 10 or 15 years of experience on top of you. So that's what I did. I started looking for jobs outside of the city. I actually lived in Toronto for about 10 years. And the first job that I landed outside of downtown Toronto was at Halton Healthcare. And I took on a clinical team lead there for alternate level of care medicine patients. And from there, I moved on to Brantford and I took on a leadership role there. I am kind of a person who has identified that in order to move up quickly, and this is my opinion, okay? This isn't in any textbook. You're in HR, Shaman, so please don't take this the wrong way, but I've realized that you climb the corporate ladder a lot quicker if you jump ship sooner. I've discovered in my research and kind of understanding the way to climb the corporate ladder that organizations have a larger budget for hiring than they do for promotion. And it takes a lot longer to be promoted within leadership if you stay within the same organization than if you, for example, work at one organization for a couple of years, gain some good experience, and then start looking outside of that organization. And quite literally, Shaman, that's how I climbed the corporate ladder. And some people might take a look at my resume and say, wow, because of all of the networks that I've worked in, I've worked University Health Network, Unity Health, Halton Healthcare. Each one of those networks have multiple hospitals attached to them. So quite literally, I can confidently say that I've worked in 13 hospitals in
Yeah.
nearly 13 years. So it's been about 13 years since I've been in acute care. And somebody might take a look at my resume and say, wow, like she's been to all these places and, it might not look good. But in my opinion, it actually makes me a more well-rounded leader because I have perspectives from so many different places and so many different teams.
Yeah.
I'm not just focused on one way of doing things. I know the way that multiple places are doing things. And I
Yeah.
feel like that adds a more dynamic perspective. So
Mm.
anyways, very long story short, teaching came into the mix around 2017, 2018. I started to be invited to be a guest lecturer in the classrooms of college programs, Sheridan specifically. And then it was actually Sheridan very shortly after my guest lecture time that tapped me on the shoulder to become a faculty, a professor there. So
Mm.
I've been teaching off and on at Sheridan since 2017, 2018. Now I teach at Conestoga, Fanshawe, George Brown, and Sheridan, all in either part-time or partial load capacity contract work. And I love it. I love teaching so much. And I don't know if it's just kind of the natural progression of my career. Not a lot of, late 30 something year old women can say that they have 24 years of experience. It's almost like I should be
Yeah.
gearing up for retirement at
That-
this point. But yeah, teaching just kind of felt like a natural progression for me. And
yeah.
now, 7 years into this, I've discovered just how passionate I am about fostering the growth and development of other young professionals because while I may be in my late 30s, I still feel like I'm in my mid 20s. And
Definitely.
being able to, interact with young people and, try to be relatable to them and try to make them, see their professional development as, more of a journey. And, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm really all about playing. I've said this before, but playing the long game is
Yeah.
really important. You can't just sort of see your career for what's right in front of you. You kind of have to see beyond what's right in front of you and imagine what kind of a life and what kind of career you want for yourself, and every single day be focusing on little things that you can do in order to make that happen. So I don't know if that's a very long drawn out explanation for how I've come to where I am today, but it's the truth.
No,
It's entirely the truth of my experience.
that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And you have mentioned a few times that whenever you are summarizing at the end that leadership. So like it's a topic in itself. So if you just very briefly say to our readers or our listeners or our viewers, you are a transformational leader, and we can easily imagine how vibrant your classes are. How
Yeah.
and we have seen the podcast that it is very warm. So what kind of your learned experiences as the key strategies you believe that drive the meaningful changes in the healthcare sector as a leadership role? What are the key strategies, very briefly, if you say?
Really, really good question. If I'm being very transparent, that's kind of my mission is to be as transparent as possible about things. I would say the way that I've developed my leadership approach is by observing leaders in the things that I don't respect about leaders.
Mm.
So I observe leaders that I think are doing a poor job, and I try to emulate everything opposite of that. So full transparency, I have had some, leaders in my professional life that I didn't mesh with, and I have a really hard time, if my person that I directly report to is someone that I identify as maybe not being transparent, or, trying to pull the wool over your eyes, or I don't know. I value transparent and
Mm,
very forthcoming communication. And I think
fascinating.
the people who report to you also value that. I think the more honest you can be with your team about your own vulnerabilities and your own idiosyncrasies and the things that you struggle with. I am very transparent with my teams and the students that I teach, what things that I struggle with, so
Yeah.
that they know and they observe if I'm struggling with something, I'm a human to them. I'm not their boss. I'm not,
Yeah.
I try to connect with them on a human level and not have there be this separation of I'm the leader, I'm the professor, you're the student, you're the employee. I try to connect to people in a real human way and have a good understanding of what people's intrinsic values are, because emotional intelligence and being able to connect with people in a real, genuine, human way, I just keep saying that, being able to connect with people, I think, is probably the most important thing as a leader. And if you don't carry emotional intelligence, at the forefront of your leadership toolkit, that emotional intelligence is something that you can have innately within you, but it's also something, I think, that if you don't have that natural sort of EQ about you, it's something that you need to practice, and it's something that you need to develop, and it's something that you need to tap into, because especially in today's day and age, the most effective leaders are the leaders that people feel connected to, and who, when their team feels heard and when their team feels valued. At the end of the day, sure, a lot of leadership is about the budget and making tough decisions, but the biggest part of being a leader is being that motivator or that inspiration to your team, because your team is really what drives everything forward. Without your team, you are nobody, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I think being a transformative leader really ties back to what your intrinsic motivators are, and identifying what the intrinsic motivators are of the people that you are working with and connecting with. Because again, the more on the same page we are, the more likely it is that we will achieve our goals, the more likely that you will have better retainment of the people that work with you. We know in healthcare, the turnover rates are astronomical. And you work
Yeah.
in HR, you know how much that impacts the budget when you're dealing with wild turnover rates. And so I just believe in connecting with people on a human level, identifying what the intrinsic and extrinsic motivators are. I think we were mentioning this before we went on camera, but I've also, identified leaders in the media and social media and in literature,
Yeah.
leaders that I respect and that I jive with or that I align with, and trying to emulate those positive qualities that I see in leaders that I respect. And again, going back to the original thought, is like leaders that I maybe have not aligned with as much, doing everything in my power to try to be the opposite of that. So that's the short answer.
Because I like the idea that I observe the people in the leadership roles that I don't align myself with, and I try to do the opposite. That is basically you are, as we say, that we are chipping off the woods and we are making a furniture out of the log. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm just removing unnecessary, I can say communication pattern, traits, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to make things, which is, and two things you have said very important. It's like resonated so much with me. It's emotional intelligence, and at the end of the day, connecting with people, and everything based on your intrinsic motivators. Such a powerful thought, because
Yeah.
I can easily imagine that, connect with that.
I can't remember where I heard this or where I watched this. I consume a lot of content, just always, trying to expand my mind. But somewhere I was watching something that said, as a leader, you have to inspire the people that you work with. You have to inspire those people, because if they don't feel inspired, then they burn out, and then you see higher rates of sick time, and you it's not that every single person is going to like you. That's another thing
Yeah.
I think I've learned over the last 10 or so years in more leadership roles is not everybody is going to like you. Not everybody is going to appreciate your
Yeah.
approach. But
True.
the reality is that the generation that's emerging, our younger Gen Z generation, are now coming into, the age where they're thinking about
Mm.
going into leadership. And I really worry that if we don't have enough inspirational leaders in healthcare or in public and social services, that fewer and fewer young people are going to choose the route of healthcare or choose the route of the helping people profession, because, it kind of has a bad rap. Nursing is a very, very hard job. Working in healthcare is very, very hard. Taking care of sick people is very hard. And a lot of young people are not drawn to that as a profession anymore because they have seen, even, coming out of the pandemic, our healthcare system virtually collapsed. And we saw all of the stress attached to that. And I think whether we want to admit it or not, healthcare is not the most glamorous field to get into. You have to go through years of education and training. And so the only way I can see being able to fix this and kind of giving healthcare a rebirth or a renaissance as a career to pursue for young people is to highlight the leaders who are doing the work to
Mm.
be attached to healthy work-life balance practices and being able to have a positive corporate culture. And what does that look like for young people? I don't think we've done enough research at this stage in the game to really understand how Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to change the way we operate in human resources and healthcare and public and social services. I don't even think we realize how much it's going to change. It's going to
Yeah.
be flipped on its head. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. Yeah. But true. And obviously we cannot forget the big elephant in the room is that AI.
Oh, yeah. And I don't know if this is going to be popular amongst the readers, but I am a big fan.
No,
Well,
we
I'm a huge fan. So,
you have to be to
yes.
survive. You have to
Yeah.
be.
I've said this 100 times. I said, if you don't hop on the bandwagon now, you will
Yeah.
be left in the dust. It's just
Yes.
like when personal computers, were hitting the streets in the early 90s and we didn't know what an email address was, but you bought into this concept of an email address. And now some of us have, like myself, I have like 9 email addresses. And this has happened in what, 30 years? So
Yeah.
where is AI going to take us in 30 years from now? It's exciting, a little bit scary, but mostly exciting, I think.
Yes. And in life, everything is a mixed package. So yeah.
Mm,
And
yes,
regarding, you have talked a lot about health sector and leadership. So given your experience with the patient flow and hospital operations, what do you think are the most pressing challenges? You can limit your conversation to three if you want.
sure.
And how can those be addressed?
Oh yeah, that's there's definitely more than 3, but I'll give you the top 3 in my
Mm.
observations.
No,
So
you can say more if you want. Please
I-
do
I'll,
not
I'll
limit.
I'll keep it brief. Part of the thing, a lot of people tease me for this, is that I talk a lot, even though I identify as an introvert. When I'm passionate about something, I just blah, blah, blah. I have so many things to say about the things that I'm passionate about. But patient flow and hospital operations, because it's been such a huge part of my career and such a huge part of my life since 2012, 2013,
Mm.
I've observed this sort of wave of how patient flow has evolved and adapted over the last decade or more. And there are, a few contributing factors to this. So our aging population, all right?
Mm.
We do not
Okay.
have enough infrastructure to support the aging population. As people are aging, they are um, living with multiple comorbidities. Okay. We keep people alive longer because we have all of these incredible surgical and pharmaceutical interventions in order to keep people alive longer. But the infrastructure and the availability of beds and wait times, in order to get elderly people into long-term care, don't even get me started about how in North America we institutionalize our elderly, and then in other countries, the idea of putting your elderly grandma or grandpa in a nursing home or something like this is a very foreign concept in other cultures. Whereas in North American culture, when granny gets to be old and senile, or have dementia, We got to put her in the home. And the reality is today, that's not how it works. You don't just get to decide, okay, Granny is old now, we're going to put her in a home. There are so many things that go into that. And I think the general public or society don't necessarily understand how complicated that process is, and that
Oh,
you have to apply and that there's a wait time. How many times have I had families come in and they say, no, she has to go to long-term care? And I say, it's not a straightforward linear
mm.
process. If you have money, lots of money, you can put your loved one in a retirement home. But who has, five or six or seven or $8,000 a month to be
Oh,
having your loved
wow.
one live in a retirement home? Yeah.
Really? That
Oh
much?
yeah, man. Like when I worked, I won't tell you exactly what region, but I worked in a region where I had a husband and wife couple. They had been living in a retirement home. Husband came into the hospital first. He had had a mild heart attack. And a day later, his wife came into hospital. She had a severe dementia. The husband was the primary caregiver for the wife. And I sat down with their daughter and I said, I know what retirement home your mom and dad live in. Like, you got to tell me, how much are you paying for them to live in this retirement home? $20,000 a month. Shaman,
Wow.
$20,000 a month they were paying for mom and dad to live in this retirement home together. And it was all because this retirement home was the one that was down the street from their home that they had lived in for 40 years. And
Okay.
they just didn't do research to say, like, what are the other options? They just said, this is where we want to live. And when they handed over the contract and said, this is how much you're paying, they obviously had the resources to do that, but nobody stopped to question, like, is there an alternative to this? And so when I had this
Mhm.
opportunity to sit down with the daughter, I explained to her, you could have hired 24/7 around the clock personal support workers to live in your mom and dad's home, and you would have saved like $12,000 a month. And she was just mind blown. And so that to me, this was years ago, Shaman, like long ago. And
Okay.
that to me was a really good indicator of just how little information the general population has around how to care for elderly people. What do you do with your elderly, loved one when it comes time to sort of make decisions about their care? If you can no longer care for them or they're no longer able to care for themselves. So this is a huge reason why hospital flow and patient flow is challenged, because of our alternate level of care population. And so say you have an elderly person that comes into hospital, maybe they've had a stroke or a hip fracture and they have a mild or moderate cognitive impairment. But then they come in hospital and they have surgery and maybe they develop an infection or a pneumonia, and then they decompensate during their hospital stay. You can't return that person to their original home. Okay. It's all of the dynamics and circumstances attached. So they end up living in the hospital while we wait to kind of come up with a plan. And we're not just talking about one person, Shaman. Like, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of ALC,
Yeah.
alternate level of care patients, that this is not a textbook term, but we refer to them as bed blockers, because if you don't have discharges from the inpatient floors, and a lot of our beds are blocked with bed blocker ALC patients, and it's not a fault of their own. As an ALC patient, it's not a lot of people want to live in a hospital, right? But the
No, no, yeah.
alternative is being in an unsafe circumstance in the community. And so there's a disconnect between the resources in the community being able to support young people, or sorry, elderly people, and being able to move people through the continuum of care. So we really need to be focusing on, and I think the Ontario Health Team system that's being established is designed to kind of bridge some of those issues. I won't get into all of that, but the OHTs are being, designed to support smaller populations, about 300,000 people per OHT approximately, as opposed to historical ways of doing things where the local health integration network was, divided into 14 segments across the province, and some regions had millions of people. And
Mm.
anyways, hopefully the OHT model will fix the ALC problem and will hopefully be able to bridge some of the services and supports that elderly people, need, because with the aging population, they say by the year 2030, over 20% of our population will be over the age of 65.
Oh, really?
And,
Oh, wow.
if we have over 20% of our population over the age of 65 and everybody's living longer with multiple diseases and comorbidities and cognitive impairments, and don't even get me started on the mental health population that was displaced from
Yeah.
institutionalization in the 1980s. Now those people are coming to be elderly, and they have not only physical, disabilities and impairments, but also psychological and mental health disabilities and impairments. So the complexity of our patients is also a contributing factor.
Yeah.
It's we're not seeing patients that are as straightforward any longer. I was just talking about this in my lecture last night. The mental health patients that we are seeing come in through the emergency department are unlike anything you can imagine. It's like things that you would see in the movies, a 38-year-old man who's just taken, a hit of crack cocaine or fentanyl, and they fall into this, psychotic, almost superhuman psychosis. And, the amount of resources that go into being able to manage drug addiction and substance abuse and mental health and,
Mm.
the complexity of all of those things combined, it's changing. The world and the patient populations are changing. Our infrastructure is not keeping up. And, also keep in mind, our hospitals were built in, the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Yes.
They were built at a time when, most emergency departments were built to accommodate, 50 people. But most emergency departments today are seeing upwards of 150 or, 175 patients a day, whereas the infrastructure was designed to support a quarter of that or half of that. So infectious disease is also another thing. If you have too many people in a hospital, it's very difficult to properly isolate and,
Mhm.
prevent people from acquiring hospital-acquired infections. So that's another really complicated thing. Slap COVID into all of this. COVID hasn't gone anywhere. We're now, factoring COVID into how we isolate people just in our
Mhm.
day-to-day practices, where, when the pandemic first hit, we were coming up with all of these creative ways to manage it, and now it's just, I hate this, but it's like our new normal. And to summarize, elderly population, we don't have the resources in alignment the way we need to in order to be able to effectively discharge those people. The complexity of our patients and, the severity of illness that we're seeing, the infrastructure, the hospitals are just simply not designed to manage the volume of people. And we've
Yeah.
already kind of touched upon leadership, but I will just say one more thing is that because our healthcare system has had such a, upheaval in the last 5 years or so, we had a huge, I guess, a mass exodus of people leaving the field of healthcare. And in a lot of cases, this has resulted now in younger clinicians being identified as champions and being promoted into leadership positions, but not necessarily having the support or the toolkit, as I've alluded to, or a mentor or the right guidance. So we're moving people into leadership positions. And, the research shows, statistics show that middle management is actually the hardest type of leadership to be in, because you have so much responsibility and so much accountability. And so we're moving young clinicians and young professionals into these middle management positions, and they're basically being fed to the wolves because there's, again, just not enough support. And a lot of middle managers are burning out and going off on stress leave and, feeling as though they're not doing, the right thing, or that they made the wrong decision. And so I've commiserated with a lot of, young professionals who are like, how can I do this for the rest of my life? This is so stressful. And I'm not working 8 hours a day. I'm working 14 hours a day, and I'm only getting
Yeah.
paid for 8 hours. And, it's a hard time to work in healthcare because, this post-pandemic world, we're still seeing so much burnout. And, it's a really important thing to talk about, sort of wellness and mental health wellness, and focusing
Mm.
on comprehensive employee well-being practices within large organizations, because you can tell in an organization if your employees are valued and you're not just a number on a payroll sheet, on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
You actually, there needs to be more recognition. Pizza parties are great, but there was a running joke during the pandemic is like, oh, well, here we get some more cold pizza. This is how we're being recognized. Let's go bang some pots in the streets. Like, this was not, the right way, I don't think. And I've had this conversation with many people. There was a resentment about this whole healthcare heroes thing. So I'm not going to sit here on my soapbox and tell you that I know all the answers to all the things, but what I can tell you is that I think all of this boils down to we need to have a way better understanding of the needs of our population from a patient perspective, and also how we can effectively and appropriately celebrate the people who have stuck by their career in healthcare and who didn't abandon ship, when things, went down, the gutter. We need to be celebrating the people that have been dedicated and committed to our organizations. How exactly we do that when we have no budget to do it, that's up to you, Shaman. You're HR. You know the answer to this probably better than I do. So
No, we don't. We don't have the answer. We have the answer theoretically, but resources are really so.
yeah, it does boil down to resources for
Yeah.
sure.
So and everything that you just said, the leadership, the dealing with the aging population, the influx of new, let's say, new patterns of influx incoming patients with mental health issues, and thank God to our interventions of medically improved systems, people are living longer. So, and I really like the term that you said about the middle management, because that's
Mm.
what I feel with all my students who work in the middle management. And trust me, Shannon, it's not a North American phenomenon.
Ah,
It's a global phenomenon.
yeah,
Trust me.
I
It's
believe
a
that. I
it's
really
a
do. I
global
believe that.
phenomenon. So I have seen Asian workplaces, I have seen European workplaces, and now I'm experiencing North American workplaces. I
Yeah.
know this is a global phenomenon. So let's just root back to the supply chain and let's go to mentorship, because you
Nice.
are
Yeah.
also work in the education sector. You are the leaders that you have seen working in your practical life, then you went up to the place where these leaders are made or educated, let's say, for the sake of conversation. So mentorship is clearly a passion for you. We can easily understand, because the way you lit up the conversation, your classrooms are must be like 1000% engaging. So what are some of the most common challenges faced by the young professionals? You have talked about Gen Zs and alphas. Half of my team is Gen Zs. So you work with them. And now I have seen your team photos. So you work with them.
Yeah.
So how do you see, because you have seen the places that they will be working, like after 5 years, 10 years. So, and now you are also seeing or observing the crisis they are facing. And you and me both can resonate with it. And so many of our readers, because we are in somehow connected with the education sector. So how do you see the hurdles for them in the education institute, and how you think they can overcome it? Like, it is a suggestion for the young professionals kind of thing. It's kind of
Mhm.
giving them a toolbox that what are the qualities they need, because you have seen the both side of the table. You have seen the end of the supply chain, the real war field, as I can say sometimes, and you
Yeah,
have
the
also seen the
trenches.
barracks, the training grounds. So now you are working in both the sectors. So as a person, as I said in the beginning of the conversation, you have many hats. What is the kind of toolbox you can say to the young professionals that you have seen them, that
Yeah.
these are the things you need to
I'm
survive
going
in the future? Yeah.
I'm going to answer your question, but just going back to your comment about how dynamic my lectures are, I had to laugh at this. Somebody, I can't remember if it was last week or whatever, but I was talking about something, and then a girl just kind of under her breath was like, I feel like I'm watching a TED talk.
Yes.
And we all laughed because I don't even realize sort of, when I go into my spiels, I hardly really use the slide decks really. I talk more about, lived
No, that's that.
experiences, and I relate the theory on the slide to stories that I tell. And I've had a
Yes.
few people, along the way. And my
Why know this happen? Oh, why know this happens? I must answer. I must intervene. Sorry.
please, yeah, yeah.
This happens because you don't teach from the textbook. You teach from your real live
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, absolutely. And
So
I've said
slides
that.
are so slides are your compass. Your lecture is the territory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've said that to my classes many times before. Like, your job is to learn the theory. My
Yeah.
job is to illustrate for you how
Yeah.
the theory connects to the
Yes.
real
Yes.
world. And so, to go back to your original question, what kind of
Please.
toolkit do people need? Well, especially for international students, because transparently, 95% of the people that I teach are internationally trained professionals,
Okay.
or people who have immigrated to Canada to pursue their education here.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, is a real sort of sticking point, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, is this whole notion of Canadian experience, or you don't have experience. And let me just remind you, back when I was applying for management positions, people just kept saying, you don't have experience doing this thing. You don't have experience managing people. And so students are, being met with, well, you don't have Canadian experience, or you don't have experience doing this thing. And so I suppose the toolkit, or the thing that young people need to be very aware of, is that you are not going to come out of a 2-year college diploma and be making six figures. You're not.
Mm.
It's just
No.
not the reality. If you are thinking you're going to, come to Canada, and yes, you have all of your previous lived experience and transferable skills and whatnot, but I don't know the messaging that people are getting from other countries, but what I've observed is that a lot of people are coming here thinking that, I'm going to take this college diploma and I'm going to be a CEO, or I'm going to be a
Yeah.
director. And it's
No.
so much more involved than that. You almost have to think back to the beginning of my journey, like take your kids to work day. In my opinion, you need to latch on to people who will be able to help you create experiences, or you
Yes.
need to create experiences for yourself. And
So true.
that's a big part of what Olive Branch Mentorship is just trying to do. We're still a startup, okay, despite having been, incorporated April 26th of 2024. And maybe what you see on social media and LinkedIn and the podcast makes it seem like we're a little further along in the process than we are, but there's so much that's going into sort of behind the scenes preparing and planning for how we can create experiences for young people. Because I don't want to go into this, blindly. I want to go into this with evidence. I want to go
Yeah.
into this, making sure that the experiences that we're creating for young people are meaningful and impactful and influential, and that we're aligning young professionals, as I was saying earlier, that we're aligning young professionals with people who are inspiring and who are empowering. We need to encourage young people to also tap into, what does that mean, transferable skill? I often say, well, what are your transferable skills? And people are like, I don't know. And I say to them, like, are you comfortable on the computer? How adapt, how quickly are you able to adapt to learning new skills? But
Mhm.
also, what previous education are you bringing to the table? What previous work experience are you bringing to the table? I can sit down with somebody and they can say, well, I just work at Subway. I'm just a sandwich maker at Subway. And I say, no, you're not just anything. You could be the CEO of sandwich making. Let's talk about all of the things that are a part of your job. You have to critically think your way through your shift. If you're running low on supplies, you have to be proactive about planning for supplies. If you have a customer that comes in that's rude to you, you have to put on your smiley face and you have to, catch more bees with honey than vinegar. And you are effectively able to time manage because your attendance is very strong at your job, and you've recently been promoted to shift lead and you're now coordinating the schedule. Like, give me any Subway sandwich maker, give me any person who works at Wendy's drive-through, and I can help you envision how you are now the CEO of the Wendy's drive-through. You need to
Magnificent.
be able to communicate
Magnificent. Yeah.
all of the skills and all of the abilities that you have in a way that presents you as not just a sandwich maker. You are the best sandwich maker that Subway has to offer. And I think not a lot of young people can sort of identify what makes them special or what makes them employable. And so that's why I feel having a mentor or having somebody that can help you see that goodness in you really does a lot for your self-confidence and for your ego and for your motivation. Because you can sit in your bedroom in a dark room on your computer applying to 47 jobs a week on Indeed, but the likelihood of those resumes being seen are very slim. We know now today more than ever that it really has a lot to do with who you know and who you align with and who sees something in you to recommend you for positions. I think that HR and hiring managers have the hardest job with recruitment nowadays because, as we've
Yeah.
already alluded to, my man, yeah, you're like rolling your eyes. Because if every single resume and cover letter within the next year will have AI attached to it. So
Mm.
when AI are fine tuning and filtering every single one of the applications that are coming through to HR, we're not going to have the ability to effectively review candidates when AI is building all of our applications. So,
Right.
Shuman, I don't know, you and I could get on board together because I believe that applying for jobs, you need to take it beyond your resume and cover letter. And this is another
Yes.
sort of toolkit that I think, a toolkit thing that I think people need to start considering. Put yourself out there in a way that's different from a resume and cover letter. Like, I'm at the point now where I'm telling people, go on LinkedIn, make a 1 minute video of yourself, tag the company that you want to work with, and say, hey, Canadian Mental Health Institution, hey, University Health Network, I applied for a job at your company and this is how incredible I am. Give me a job. And then see all of the people that comment and say, this person is incredible, give them a job, ba, ba, ba. It's not going to be about the CV or the cover letter. Like,
No.
I apologize to anybody who's listening to this who still believes that the cover letter is valuable something, but I just don't understand why we are still asking people to write cover letters when most of the time we're going into these interviews and you can make a decision within 2 minutes whether or not this is going to be a good candidate or not. It has nothing to do with the AI generated cover letter anymore. So,
No.
mentorship, putting yourself out there in a different way, stepping outside of your comfort zone, um, identifying what your transferable skills are, make yourself the CEO of your job. Even if you're not the CEO of your job, convince yourself that you're the CEO of your job. Because if you take your professional development, um, I always tell people, never say you are just anything. You are not just anything. You are this thing. Don't diminish what you are or what you have to bring to the table because we are so much more dynamic. And if we diminish ourselves, then that, is a good indicator to the hiring manager that you maybe don't have confidence. And I don't particularly, I would say you kind of have to fake it till you make it, right? That's a very common thing that we sort of hear, is fake it till you make it. But I say this all the time, like, I don't know what I'm doing. 99% of the time, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm really good at convincing you that I do know what I'm doing. And I'm really good at, connecting with people. And if you're able to connect with people in a meaningful
Yeah.
way, again, I think that putting yourself out there, making all of the connections you possibly can, and bottom line, at the end of the day, network, 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 whatever that looks like for you. I can think of 1,000 ways to encourage people to network. But yeah, I think networking, building your brand, putting yourself out there in a different way, being an effective communicator, like, and these are not all things that come very naturally to people. So if somebody's sitting here listening to this thinking, but I'm really introverted and I'm really shy and I have a hard time making eye contact, like, so do I. So do I. But if you want to be something, if you want to establish yourself as someone, you have to set yourself apart from the competition. You just have to figure out what it is that makes you special and celebrate that.
Mm.
Shout it from the rooftops, in my opinion.
Yeah. And the reason sometimes I say a few things. First of all, I always say to people, your resume is not a mechanical document, it's an organic document. First.
Yeah.
Second, I always say network, but do the well-wishers network.
Yes. Yeah.
The
That's a good
network,
point.
yeah, that if even if you can have only 5 people in your network,
Yeah.
but they're your well-wisher.
Yeah. I challenge my students every semester. I say this to every class. I say, if you are on LinkedIn before the end of this semester, I want you to message 50 people, but send them a personal message, not, hey, or the automated AI response now is, hey, it's been a while since we connected. And it's like,
Mm.
okay, but if you're messaging somebody who has worked in healthcare for 25
Mm.
years and has, 8,000 followers on LinkedIn, they probably receive 20 to 50 messages a week. Like, hey, can you get me a job? Hey, can you give me a job? Hey, can you get me a job? You are not going to connect with that person on LinkedIn if you just send a generic, hey, 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 you have to connect with them in a meaningful way. You have to scroll through their LinkedIn profile, see what kind of content they're engaging with. And then when the message you send to them has to be specific about something you admire about that person or something you admire about their professional journey,
Yeah.
research that they've done. You
Yeah.
have to point out something specific and do not even mention in your initial message to that person that you're looking for a job.
Oh no.
Message them indicating that you're looking to grow your professional network and that you're looking to establish yourself in Canada or whatever it is. But do not lead with, hey, I need a job, because you will not. Maybe you might get some responses, but I can tell you from my own experience, I can't respond to those messages anymore. I used to respond to them and give, direction and guidance. But now with the volume of requests and the volume of messages and emails and DMs that come through, I am very, very selective with the people that I will engage with. And I would harbor a guess to say that that's where a lot of executives are kind of now, especially in the LinkedIn landscape. You have to connect with people in a well-wisher way or in a meaningful way. It can't be about you when you make those first initial connections. It has to be more about like, hey, I really admire you and I'd love to go for coffee with you and I'd love to pick your brain on this research that you've done or whatever it is. It has to be a meaningful extension of the olive branch, as I say. You have to extend the olive branch in a meaningful human kind of way.
Yes, you have told that, and it is really resonating in your all the answers, that all the conversation topic that you're doing. Connect meaningfully with people. And I always, another two things I always say to the student, and then we will come to the eventually to the last question, that I always say, focus on learning before earning.
Yeah. Oh, I got to write that down. Focus on learning before earning. Yeah.
And the second thing I say to them is that we have reactions, don't reflections.
Ooh, I love that one too.
So
That's really good.
we react to things, we react to job application, we react to interviews, but we don't have the reflection.
Yeah.
So that is why you just say the point. You are not just anything.
Yeah, you're
You are
not
the
just
CEO of your job. The
yeah.
moment you realize that, whenever you have reflection.
Yeah. Yeah. I say something similar about be proactive, not reactive. So
Yes,
be proactive in everything
Stephen
you do.
Covey, the
And
greatest mind.
just going back to the comment you made about, you're the CEO of your own job. I've been in executive leadership. I made it to the director level. I was thinking that once I got to the director level, that I would be able to create change and that I would be able to make things happen. I got to the director level and I realized I'm still not able to make things happen the way I want to make them happen. So do you know what I did? I started my own company and I made myself the CEO. You know what I mean? Like, if you
Yeah.
want to create change, make that happen for yourself. Don't wait
Yes.
for somebody else to make that happen for you. You have to be the proactive driver of your own journey.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you watch The Office at all. Anybody out there watch The Office? But Michael
Yeah,
Scott.
I have said, oh, full season, please.
Oh, yeah, okay. So like Michael Scott is a perfect example. When he
Yeah,
got
true.
fired from Dunder Mifflin and he started Michael Scott Paper Company,
Yes.
at the table, and he was like, I don't care. If Michael Scott Paper Company goes down, I'll start another paper company and I'll start another paper company and I'll start another paper company. And I think that that's how young people need to envision their professional journey, is like, if I don't get this, then I'm going to do that. And if I don't get that, then I'm going to do this. And I just think that there are so many avenues and options for people to
Yeah.
think outside of the box and how they drive
Yeah.
their career. I could do a TED talk. I
Yes, you
could do
should.
a whole TED talk
And
on
and
that.
and and the way the conversation is going, I will really request you find some time and write a book.
Oh, listen. Oh my gosh, that's been on
Because
my
do you know what, in the book publishing these days, there is a saying in the book publishing arena or the world these days, your book is your new visiting card.
yeah, it's
Your
yeah.
book is your new business card. And so many people we have talked over the time with this conversation for Magazika, some of them have book, and it is a really, really good conversation starter for anything.
Oh
And
yeah.
regarding The Office, I must say, I always suggest people watch Office and Pursuit of Happiness together,
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that.
because
Yeah.
that was the lighter side and that is the motivation side.
Absolutely.
So you
Yeah.
have a motivation with the fun.
Yeah.
So that's
I
the
I do very, very much want to write a book. That's been actually
Please
because I'm
do.
an English
Please
and
do.
creative writing major, right? Remember, my university
I
started
remember
as a
that.
writing major.
Why do you think I said that? Write a
Yeah,
book.
yeah. But I won't get too far into this, but I was actually the product of a teenage pregnancy and I was adopted and I kind of the system is really the reason why I am the person that I am today, because it was social workers and counselors and judges and therapists and firefighters and ambulance drivers. Like these people were huge in my safety as a child. And, you
Um,
know, so I really kind of latch on to this beginning part of my life journey as being a very traumatic and, very tumultuous. And, the story that's attached to my early childhood upbringing, I didn't have stable parental guidance. And so I leaned into my teachers and I leaned into, camp counselors and I leaned into other adult figures in my life to kind of lean into for support and encouragement, because I unfortunately I didn't have that from my family or my parental units. And so the story that I have sort of overcoming all of that and still being, a positive light despite all of the things that I've gone through in my life, I do feel that that would make a very good book. I could
yeah.
probably write an encyclopedia, chapter on it, but writing a book. Anybody out there listening? If you know of a publisher that's interested in helping me make that happen, I know you can self-publish on Amazon.
Yes, yes, do
But
that.
that's also, something that
And
I
you have a fascinating advertising tool in your hand as well. So
yeah. In
please,
the podcast, so we haven't talked about the podcast too much, but next month we do have an ER nurse on the podcast who's written a book, and her book will actually be released in November. And part of my sort of connection with her was, whoa, you write a book? Whoa, you do ghostwriting? Like, so she and I are kind of, have our finger on the pulse there. We have a lot to sort of share in terms of our experiences working in healthcare and whatnot. So there is a book. The book is all up here. It's
no,
not
there are a few. There are a
not
few. There
written
is
down
not
yet,
one.
but
There are a few.
there are a few. Yeah,
There
definitely.
are a few. There are a few.
There are
No,
a few.
you have to, because you have such a diverse experience. So that is, our team was very much fascinated about your profile, that she wears and she has already done so many roles. So it has to be. And I will just at this point, I must say that our team was requesting me that do not have one podcast with her, one conversation, have multiple over
I
the
have
time.
a lot to
And
say, clearly.
yeah, and at the end of the conversation, they always told me if she has time.
No,
So,
I will make time for you. I will make time for you.
so,
While I am a very busy human, and most people will say you're the busiest person I know, there must be 18 of you, but I make time for the things that are important to me. I think that it boils down, when you are a very busy person, you still have to identify the things that motivate and inspire you. You can spend all this time motivating and inspiring other people, but if you lose sight of the things that you are passionate about, or if you don't spend time doing the things that you love to do and you just make your entire existence about serving and supporting other people, that is a really good way to resent the position that you are in. And so I firmly believe that you have to have your own passions and you have to have your own interests and you have to
yeah,
have
yeah,
you have to have things that motivate you and inspire you. You can't just be a robotic, going into meetings 100 times a day and being on Zoom calls, and
yeah,
you have to maintain your own you have to maintain whatever makes you tick, whatever inspires you have to make time for those things. And the idea of sitting down and sharing my story and sitting down and extrapolating upon all of these different concepts, this is something I'm super passionate about, and I'll
yeah,
leave this conversation feeling like my cup is very full,
mm,
because I've felt and I'm feeling like I'm getting a message out there that I think is incredibly important. And
definitely, yeah,
yeah.
definitely, definitely. And the busy people, the real, in a real sense, busy people I have seen in my life, they're basically passionate about multiple things.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah. I don't know any CEO or any, person in executive leadership that's one dimensional.
No,
They are multi-dimensional, multifaceted.
life is like that, no?
Well, it has to be. It has to
Yeah,
be.
life is like that. So life is multifaceted, life is multidimensional. If you are truly aligned with your life, your intrinsic values that you said, your passions,
Yeah.
then you have to be also multifaceted. You are passionate about multiple things, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
again, the way we will end the first installment of this conversation, the second installment will be in the upcoming times, whenever you're
You
free.
can have me back whenever. Yeah, you can have me
Oh,
back.
truly an honor for us to have a person like you in our podcast, because we are a very, very new voice in a huge crowd.
Me
So,
too. Me too. Yeah,
yeah,
we'll
so
grow
as I,
together.
yeah, so please. So, looking ahead, because
Mm,
you have such a long track record. You have started at 14, as you said.
yeah.
So, whenever people plan summer vacation, you have seen real work life.
Yeah. Yep.
So, looking ahead, with all these vast years of experience, almost 2.5 decades, what are your hopes for future healthcare and professional development? And how do you see your role in it?
I
Your
love that.
dreams, your vision, because you're so passionate. The how many minutes I hear you, I never becomes bored. Never become bored. You don't imagine our whole team is listening to you with rapt attention.
Hey, guys.
So yeah. So what are your hopes for future healthcare and professional development, and how do you see in that landscape in future?
Yeah.
Please.
This is a very easy answer for me. A few weeks ago, a very close friend, colleague of mine, she actually brought her 4 little girls onto the podcast. So that episode will be airing end of November, beginning of December.
Oh,
I
guys, take a
think
note.
they are,
Yeah.
how old are they? 12, 10, 8, and 7 or something like that. I made the concerted effort to ensure that we had an episode with young minds. And I know that my colleagues' girls are incredible. They are all in multiple extracurricular activities. I've seen, them kind of growing over the last 5, 6 years that I've been
Beautiful.
aligned with my colleague. And
Beautiful.
I've seen them growing and adapting. And I personally believe that we need to start with the younger generations and getting an understanding of what they are passionate about. Again, this is a thing that I've heard somewhere along the way, and I can't remember who, but if you can find out who said this, give them credit, of course. But we need to stop asking young people, what job do you want to have? Or what do you want to be when you grow up? This is a question that we've asked young people forever. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a firefighter. I want to be this. We can't ask young people, what do you want to be when you grow up anymore? We have to say, what kind of problems do you want to solve? What
Yeah.
kind of people do you want to work with?
Mm,
Because the reality is, the jobs that we have today might not even be jobs in 10 or 15 years. They may not even be actual positions, or they'll be an adapted version of the position because of, as we've already alluded to, how AI is going to change,
yeah.
the way
Yeah.
things are working. And so I have an invested interest in gaining a better understanding of young people and what would motivate and inspire them to choose a career in healthcare. Because let's face it, we cannot have TikTok dancers running our hospitals and running our communities in 10 years. Like, we just can't. We have to identify from the younger generations what problems it is you want to solve, what kind of people do you want to work with, and then we have to foster that growth and development from our own landscape as more established leaders and professionals. And we need to be creating those experiences, positive experiences for young people. So what does
Yeah.
that mean? Well, it means tapping back into bring your kids to work day, but maybe it's not just one day. Maybe we're bringing kids in grade 6, 7, and 8. We're bringing them into the hospitals in grade 6, or we are, having more, I don't know, just more dynamic sort of outreach and offering, positive experiences to young people so that they see healthcare in a different lens. Because right now with how much social media we are consumed by, I think so much of what young people see is the highlight reel of people's lives. And we don't actually get to see sort of the hard work that goes into, people's careers and whatnot. And so I think a lot of people are like, well, I'll just start a YouTube channel and I'll, be a millionaire making YouTube videos, or I'll be a TikTok dancer and I'll be an influencer and I'll, be a skincare, this is the thing. Like some of the little girls that I sat down with, they were talking about their skincare routine at 12 years old. And I'm thinking, like, we have to do something with the younger generation. And so the very first solution, I think, for the future of healthcare is identifying young people who still say, I want to be a nurse or I want to be a doctor, identifying who those young people are and doing everything in our power to create an alternative way of educating them. There's a company based out of Texas. Ah, man, I can't remember. I think they're called 2 Hour Education, or yeah, 2 Hour Education, maybe. And it's this woman, she's a mother, she's a Stanford, graduate, brilliant woman. She's completely reframed the way education is being delivered through this institution that she's created. She's got people who are like young people, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and they are in college courses, all
Wow.
because of the way that she's sort of shifted education. And I've been following her for a few months now. She has people banging down her door wanting to adapt and evolve their own version of what it is she's doing. So
Oh.
personally, I think education landscape is going to change. I think the way that we foster the growth and development of young people needs to change. I think our public school system, the way it's currently designed, is very kind of one-dimensional. We're not in a lot of ways factoring in all of the different ways that people learn. Young people all learn in a different way. And especially we factor in the fact that so many young people are doing online learning now. I can't tell you how many of my students have said, if I have an online class, I fall asleep to the Zoom. Like I'm not really paying attention to the Zoom. So not saying that we eliminate online learning together, but how can we adapt and evolve online learning so that the time you are spending on an online class is actually meaningful and the instructor is not just wah, 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 and you're falling asleep to the lecture. How can we adapt and evolve with the technology and the resources that we have available to us to adapt and evolve with the emerging generation that's coming up the pipeline? We have to, again, tap into what their intrinsic motivators are. We need to do more research on young people because it's just not an obvious choice for young people to say that they want to be a healthcare professional.
Mm.
They might say, oh, I want to be a nurse because my mom is a nurse. But will they actually do that? I don't know. One of the 4 little girls that I sat down with, she's like, I'm going to be the prime minister. And I'm like, yeah, you are. You are going to be the prime minister. Let's make that happen. Like, let's figure out how you as a young person are identifying that you want to be a leader. At 9 years old, you are identifying that you want to be a leader. So let's make you a leader now.
Yeah.
Let's put you into some kind of emerging leaders program. If your young child is showing signs of these incredible strengths and
Guide
confidence,
them. Yeah.
foster that,
Yeah.
celebrate that. Mary, my colleague, she's like, what am I going to do? Like, she has so much personality. And I'm like, this is incredible. Like, she could change the world. She will be a young person that changes the world because of the parenting strategy that my friend has taken with her girls. Like, nothing is unattainable for those little girls. And I just think that we need more parents out there who are more involved with identifying what their children's strengths are and not leaving it to the educators in our public school system to be doing the parenting and to be doing the inspiring. We need parents to be equally as on board with identifying those strengths and creating those experiences for young people. So bottom line, Shaman, like the answer is the future of healthcare are young people. The future of healthcare are young people. And if we don't have young people choosing the career of healthcare, who are going to take care of all of our old people in 7 to 10 years? Who?
Yeah.
Because nurses are retiring left, right, and center just as quickly as the people over the age of 65. They are retiring. So who's going to take care of our older population if people are not choosing to go into the field of caring for people? So bottom line, healthcare for me is identifying how we can rebirth the career of healthcare and helping people, how we can celebrate that the same way that being a TikTok dancer is celebrated. I think we have to get into the faces of young people who want to do this, and we have to create a system that fosters their growth and development in a way that they're not turned off by it.
Shannon, we can't think of a way how to thank you for such an engaging. I rarely use this word because this is so wrongly used sometimes. This was a very engaging conversation. And thank you very much for helping us with that. And we really pray and hope and kind of earnest request to you that this is not the last installment that we're meeting. There will be future conversation with you because these messages need to go out to the reader. So thank you very much for today's conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great. Wonderful. Appreciate it so much. I look forward to the next time.
Thank you. Thank you.